I'm going to read to you, Dreamer Has a Nightmare. Dreamer, the rhinoceros, waddled over to the pond and looked deeply into the water. He saw several shiny fish swimming lazily back and forth. As he watched, his large head swayed from side to side, following the fish. His eyelids began to droop lower and lower. Finally, his eyes closed, and Dreamer's head dropped with a splash into the pond. Shadow the raccoon and Screech the monkey, who were watching Dreamer from a nearby tree, hurried over to the pond and pulled the rhino's huge head from the water. The raccoon climbed onto Dreamer's head and opened one large eye. Amazing. He's still asleep, he told Screech. Never felt a thing, the monkey noted. With a rhino-sized snort, Dreamer stood up, causing the raccoon to slide down his nose until he hung by one paw from the rhino's horn. I wasn't sleeping, Dreamer said. I was only resting my eyes. How did I get so wet, Shadow? The raccoon laughed and then skipped into the woods with Screech. Dreamer slowly walked over to Cozy Cave. Everyone thought he slept all the time, and maybe he did take his share of little naps and snoozes. An active rhino needs lots of rest. In the cave, Dreamer lay down on the cool dirt and once again closed his eyes. I love to sleep, the rhino thought, because then I can dream. In my dreams, I can go anywhere and do anything. Then when I wake up, I'm still safe at home in Noah's Park, right where I want to be. Ponder and Honk stopped at the pond for a drink. They could hear Dreamer's loud snores coming from the cave. He sleeps all the time, said Honk, admiring his reflection in the water. When does he have time to bathe? He really needs to work on his appearance. Looks are not that important, Honk, Ponder reminded the camel. Dreamer does sleep a lot, but he is a very... Okay, Kingston, it's okay. It's okay, lay down. It's okay. Ah. Good boy, good boy. Ponder and Honk stopped at the pond for a drink. They could hear Dreamer's loud snores coming from the cave. Hold on. Okay. Ponder and Honk stopped at the pond for a drink. They could hear Dreamer's loud snores coming from the cave. He sleeps all the time, said Honk, admiring his reflection in the water. When does he have time to bathe? He really needs to work on his appearance. Looks are not that important, Honk, Ponder reminded the camel. Dreamer does sleep a lot, but he is a very smart rhinoceros. We often depend on his ideas. Remember, what's inside you is important too. And besides, Dreamer loves to dream. Dreamer let out a huge roar. Seconds later, he came galloping out of the cave right into the pond, taking Ponder and Honk with him right into the water. What's wrong, Dreamer? Honk sputtered, removing a slippery fish from his ear. My dream, it was scary. I've never had a scary dream before. I was so afraid. The rhinoceros stumbled out of the water and crashed sobbing to the ground. Ponder hopped over to his friend. You had a nightmare, he told him. A nightmare is just a scary dream. It's not real. Dreamer looked at the old frog. It was real, and it was awful. All of the animals of Noah's Park gathered around the frightened rhino. What was so horrible, Dreamer? Stretch the giraffe asked. Were there scary monsters or giant bugs? Dreamer shook his head, but did not say a word. He just huddled on the ground. Was this your first nightmare? Asked Ivory. the elephant? I remember mine. I dreamed that a big wind carried me away. It must have been a tornado, laughed Shadow, twirling around. In my first nightmare, a giant tree tried to swallow me. I think it was a dogwood tree. I got stuck in a mud hole in my first nightmare, Honk said. It was terrible. I got very dirty. All I remember about my first nightmare is a big paw and giant snapping teeth, shivered Screech. No, I think that was my sister. I had a nightmare where my mane kept growing until it covered my whole body, remembered Howler the lion. I couldn't see or move because the hair was so thick I felt like a bush. Dreamer looked up at the others. It was nothing like any of those, he said. Mine was much scarier because it was so real. For the next 2 days, Dreamer stared at the water in the pond. He did not eat or sleep. You need to sleep, Dreamer, and you need to eat something, Ponder told his friend on the 3rd day. Here, I brought you a bunch of bananas. Thank you, Ponder. Dreamer swallowed the bananas with a single gulp. I did need to eat, but I'm never going to go to sleep again. The next day, Dreamer was still awake, but he had to hold his eyelids up to keep his eyes open. Ponder again brought the rhino some food. You must get over this, said the wise frog. Most animals have nightmares, but they still go to sleep the next night. Maybe you should tell us about your nightmare. The tired rhino looked at Ponder and then nodded his head in agreement. We were all there. You, Shadow, and you, Stretch, and you, Howler. All of us. We were in some kind of building that floated on the water. And the water, it was everywhere. Rain was pouring out of the sky. Huge waves were crashing all around us. It was very dark, but great bolts of lightning and thunder exploded around us. There was a man in the building, and he tried to keep us calm, but the water just kept pouring down. I was more afraid than ever before. I felt like the rain would never stop. When Dreamer finished his story, most of the animals agreed that it was the scariest nightmare they had ever heard. Ponder just looked at Dreamer, though, and did not say anything. That night, all the animals slept except Dreamer. A short time later, Screech came screaming out of the pond. I had Dreamer's nightmare, Screech told the others. It was so real, I'm never going to sleep again. The next evening, the animals all went to sleep again. All that is except for 2. This night, Dreamer and Screech stayed awake, their eyelids held open. Sometime in the middle of the night, there were 2 more screams. I had Dreamer's nightmare, sobbed Ivory. And I did too, cried Howler. We're never going to sleep again, they said together. When the darkness fell, there were 4 animals with their eyes barely open. Ponder looked at them and shook his head, but he still did not say anything. Before the night was over, Stretch, Honk, and Shadow had all had Dreamer's nightmare too. The following day, Ponder floated around on the far side of the pond. As the sun set, he went back to the cave where nearly all of the animals were huddled, each doing his best to keep his eyes open and to stay awake. The nightmare you have been having is not a nightmare at all, started the frog as he paced in front of his friends. You are remembering something that happened to all of us a long time ago. The building you are dreaming about was actually an ark, a type of boat, and God told Noah to build the ark and then gather some of each type of animal onto it. When Noah had done this, it began to rain. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The rain caused the great flood that you are dreaming about. You were all on the ark. You were just too young or too frightened to remember. I was on the ark too, but I watched and listened to Noah during the storm. Noah knew that God was with us all the time. He knew that God would protect us and keep us safe. So each time that Noah became afraid, he would remember that God was with him. God gave Noah the strength to be brave. Now you can be brave too, by understanding that God is always with you. You can go to sleep knowing that God will protect you. I think I can be brave, said Dreamer slowly, if I know God is with me. Me too, agreed Screech. I can be strong with God's help. Me too, chimed in the others. That night, all of the animals slept soundly. There were no more nightmares, or if there were, the animals were brave because they knew that God was with them all the time. Dreamer again enjoyed his sleep and his dreams. He too had learned to trust that God would watch out for him even in his sleep.